Hi guys, we are on day 8, so we are officially through 1 week of this challenge. So I just want you to take a minute to kind of think about all the things that we've talked about so far. Hopefully some of those are sticking, but the goal is really just to focus on one thing for a day and then move on to the next thing and focus on that. But if you find something that works for you and something that's really stuck with you, keep utilizing that tool. They're meant to be tools for you to have in your toolbox that you can use at any time just to help you stay back on track and just kind of be more mindful around the foods that you're eating. So today we are going to talk a little bit about habits, especially bad eating habits that we have. So your reflection prompt for today is to write down or think about one of your worst eating habits. And I want you to think about something big and I want you to think about something small and then pick which one you feel that you can most easily conquer or that's going to mean the most to you. So a lot of times what happens when I work with clients is they have a goal in mind but they have no idea to get there. And I want you to think about habits as the way to get where you're going. It's the process that gets you there. And that's really important, maybe even more important than where you're going. So you might end up getting somewhere that you didn't anticipate getting, reaching a goal that you didn't think you would ever reach, or reaching a goal that had never even crossed your mind but that you're really happy with. And the best way to get there is by creating a system that is going to help you get there. So when it comes to eating, typically it's bad eating habits that hold you back, right? So think about it if you are somebody who is naturally a little bit messy and your room is dirty, right? If you have all this motivation one day to clean your room or clean the house, whatever it is, and you do it, it's clean, you feel so much better, right? It's going to get messy again if you don't put the system in place and create the habits in your life to keep it clean naturally. It's naturally going to get messy. It's going to require a lot of motivation again to have this big overhaul and clean it up. And the same thing happens with our diet. You know, resolutions are coming up. The new year's coming. It's the perfect time of year for everybody to come up with these resolutions and these goals. They clean up their diet. They hit it hard. And then they haven't put those habits in place in order to make it last. So what happens is people fall off the wagon. Maybe you've been one of these people. You've made a resolution. Come January 1st, you go all in. It lasts a little while, but then pretty soon it gets hard and you stop, right? It's easy to stop when you don't have the habits built in place, and those habits take a little bit of time to build up. Repetition is huge. You know, it takes a lot of repetition in order for something to stick. Doing it for a week is not going to make it stick. Doing it for a month is likely not going to make it stick, quite honestly. So, it's really important to recognize it, but that also happens with bad habits. So when it comes to bad habits, it's really easy to say, I'm going to do this today because I don't feel well, or I'm being lazy, or I'm unmotivated, or whatever, and then that leads to doing it again because of something else, and it leads to doing it again. And pretty soon it becomes a bad habit. Happens with small things with food, happens with big things with food. So it might be as small as, cooking with canola oil or something like that, vegetable oil. If it's in your house, you're like, well, I'm out of olive oil right now, I'll just use it this one time. Usually turns into more than one time, right? Same thing with eating out or going and having something that doesn't sit well with you. If it's like spaghetti doesn't sit well with you, but like, oh, I'll have spaghetti this once and then again and again and again, it just adds up over time, right? And the thing with habits is that they compound. So this is something I talk about a lot. Doing one thing once isn't going to make a huge difference, but as you add on to things, it makes a huge difference in the long run, and that's why it's really important to build up as you go, as opposed to doing it all at once and seeing what sticks. It's like throwing something at the wall, see what sticks. It doesn't usually work, right? So today I want you to think about what one of those bad habits is, but I also want you to think about how you got there, how that started, if you can kind of root back to where that kind of came from. And then I want you to take a step back, and I want you to think about if one of your best friends told you that they had that same habit, what's the advice that you would give them? A lot of times we are our own biggest critic. We are our worst enemy, and we are hardest on ourselves. So I want you to think about the most caring way you would say it, or the advice you would give to somebody. I don't want you to try to convince that somebody that they need to fix their habit, but rather I want you to like think about questions that you might ask them, things that are holding them back, things that might like open the door for them to make that transformation as opposed to convincing them, right? If it's, I know that my bad habit is I have a sweet tooth every afternoon after a couple hours after lunch, and I don't like it. I know it's bad. I want to stop. If somebody were to tell me like, hey, you need to stop doing that, I'm probably going to resist, right? And that's the point of this exercise. I want you to think about if somebody you really cared about, what would you tell them? What kind of tips would you give them? I'm not saying you need to implement these in your life, but I just want you to think about what you might tell somebody else with that same problem. And then today's assignment, I want you to use a smaller plate when you eat. So I understand that most of your meals may or may not be on a plate, but hopefully at least one meal it is. And I want you to start with a smaller plate. So typically when you buy a plate set, they come with your dinner plates and they come with your salad plates. Try eating on the salad plate. It might mean that you need seconds, and that's totally okay. But what we find is that when you start with a smaller plate, you're less likely to overeat. If you start with a big plate and it's got a lot of food on it, it's a lot harder to stop yourself when you get to a certain point of being full. If it's a smaller plate, you're going to have to recognize, hey, I'm still hungry, I need some more food, and then make the conscious decision to go back for seconds. Try doing that. If you can do it with all your meals today, that would be great. Even if that means you have to put your meals in smaller Tupperware or something like that to break it up, try that. And this kind of goes back to what we worked on initially about eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. So the point today is eat as much as you want, as much as you need to, but stop when you're full and start with a smaller portion and see what happens, okay? I will talk to you guys tomorrow.